Will the committee supply please come to order? This section of the committee supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning. Questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to welcome the Minister back to estimates. This is a very important process that we use to get to know a little bit more about what's going on in the department. I just want to begin today by saying that as educators and human beings, yesterday was a very difficult day. I know that the Minister also has experience working in schools, also has experience working with kids that endure trauma, families that endure trauma. Yesterday was very difficult. I found myself taken back 11 years before when I was working in a school, having to process very much that's a repeat event that leaves us bereft and also speechless, knowing that schools are safe places. They're supposed to be harbors of safety, harbors of support, places where parents hand over the care of their child to very caring, dedicated individuals. And to see a school again targeted in that way is difficult. I know we have the former Minister of Education across from us here today too. I know he knows that those events leave a mark. And Mr. Chair, at this point, I'll end that comment and offer the Minister a chance to respond. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to, thank my friend, the MLA for Transcona, for bringing this topic up, and it's a tough situation. Definitely something that it doesn't matter if it happens, next door or in the neighboring school division or in the neighboring province or in the neighboring country or anywhere throughout the world. This senseless act of violence is absolutely horrendous. I know the member, much like myself, worked in the school system for quite some time, and we've dealt with different situations, whether it's with student services or just, it could be as simple as some threats, I guess. It definitely gives a perspective for us to, number one, be thankful to a certain degree that when you do get home, you put that extra few seconds, minutes into the loved ones that you have at home, and in my case, thank God that they're okay and they're safe and all of that for sure. And each and every day, I think, and I don't think it matters how old they are either. I think as a parent or as a family member, as a community member, I think you wish that everybody can leave their home in the morning and return home and safe in the evening. And I know that, working with many administrators and school officials throughout the province and throughout my time when I was still in school, I mean, this definitely shakes a community up, shakes a household up for sure. And I know that many educators and administrators take various forms of training to deal with these types of situations. And And I know that they spring into action when things like this do happen. But at the same time, I do know that there's time for some reflection and decompression after events like this as well. So I appreciate the member for bringing it up, and definitely, as all sides of the House today in the chamber stood for a moment of silence in just thinking about the situation, and thankfully something like that hasn't or doesn't occur here. We know that on a yearly basis there are various threats at the school level or within communities, municipalities, and I have to maintain vigilant, as I know that the member opposite would agree with me. I'm sure we have to maintain vigilant that those training, all that training that we do take as educators, and those that are in a supervisory or administration type role, you hope that you never ever have to use it, but you hope, and I know that all that good training does come to the forefront in individuals' minds when it is needed. And so whether that's law enforcement or school administration, I know that the safety of students and staff are absolute paramount. And when events like this happen, again, doesn't matter where, I think it all gives us an opportunity to think about the various policies and processes that we have in place, basically throughout all sectors, not only within the province, but everywhere else. So I again look forward to further questions coming from the member opposite, and carrying on the discussion. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Minister for his comments. It does cause pause, and it does force us to reflect on ensuring that we put the safety of students first, and ensuring that families, community know that schools remain that beacon of safety for their kids. I want to thank the Minister for his comments there. I will get into some of the organizational structures of the department. In reviewing them from the previous year to this year, there are some changes to the structure, as was reported in April of 2021. There was a planning and transformation ADM within the department, and I noticed that that's been removed this year. And that's an interesting development. Of note too is that there is now a corporate services ADM that's been added to the leadership team. And the corporate service ADM remains vacant. My question to the Minister, Mr. Chair, is can he provide what that job description would be for a corporate services ADM within the Education Department? And when does he see this position being filled?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So basically, the And you know what? This is a good question coming from the member opposite. Basically, the title in the department that was in 2021, it's been renamed Corporate Services. So it's the same group, just renamed to Corporate Services.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second part of my question was, does he know when that position will be filled?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, much like, the member from Transcona knows some of this. I mean, when there is a vacancy and, you basically put forward, a plan, and you put the plan forward and ask for, there's a recruitment strategy and a process that is underway, and that is underway. And so when an individual gets hired for that position, we'll make sure that the member is alerted shortly thereafter.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also of note, Mr. Chair, was the change of leadership at the ADM level. One person remains from the previous year's organizational structure. This is quite a shift in the leadership team, and especially within a Department of Education. My question to the Minister, Mr. Chair, is what brought about this change at the ADM level? And what does he look forward to as far as leadership from this group?
The honourable minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, as the member may know as well, as in certain circumstances, definitely since the Premier, and I know I've shared this with the member before, I am I was more than honored and continue to be honored to hold this position as Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning. And so in January, when the department basically grew, because we brought the wonderful team of early childhood learning over into the department, of course, that brings in an additional position. And so that's why you see an added ADM in there. There is a few new faces within the team, and that basically what I can share to the member without divulging a whole lot of personal information is that and one individual is on temporary leave, and two have actually taken opportunities elsewhere in governments. And so I know that he's looking at the same chart because he mentioned the vacancy of the Assistant Deputy Minister for Corporate Services, which we have the recruitment process well underway, and are encouraged that we will be filling that position. But financial and administrative services, we have our Executive Financial Officer, Claire Bruel. We have Mona Pandy, who's our Assistant Deputy Minister for System Performance and Accountability. We have our Helen Robinson Settee, who's the Director of Indigenous Inclusion Directorate. And we have Janet Tomey, who is Assistant Deputy Minister for Student Achievement and Inclusion. And we have Jaren Villel, who is our Acting Deputy Minister for Early Learning and Childcare. So with that, Mr. Chair, I look forward to the member for Transcona's next question.
The honourable member for Transcona.
The second, thank you, Mr. Chair. The second part to my question kind of touched upon kind of a thematic approach as to what the department will be known for. Prior to 2016, Mr. Chair, the department really had a focus on education for sustainable development and provided substantial resources to schools, to educators, to everyone that worked in the system regarding ESD, Education for Sustainable Development. I guess what I'm driving at with my question to the minister regarding at the ADM level is, what does he see as a theme emerging from this group that he's going to bring to educators, or that this group is going to bring to educators in the province? Thinking back to what the department was really focused on with Education for Sustainable Development, what's the next focus going to be? Where are the next major resources going to be targeted towards?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And It was a good question from the member from Transcona, especially of course being an educator himself and an administrator for quite a few years before he got into this wonderful occupation, an honorable occupation as an MLA. And I think, you know, in some cases when he talks about sustainable development within education, I think we also have to make sure that that some of the information that the member's putting out there is accurate. And I just want to assure the member that that sustainability of our education and early childhood learning department is actually part of that fabric that the teachers on a day-to-day basis deliver to their students within, you know, with consultations with their administration, with the department, with our education partners all across this great province of ours. You know, I know the member, you know, likes to share the odd thing that happened before 2016, and I'm not sure if his leader really wants him to be bringing up anything along those lines, but I digress, Mr. Chair. I think, you know, part of our focus, of course, you know, we know that the last Royal Commission on Education was not done since 1959. You know, we decided to say, hey, you know, it's time for the education, the K-12 system to have a look at and a bit of a commission and hear from Manitobans on what they want to see, you know, moving forward. You know, well over 25,000 individuals had shared their opinions on anything in regards to education moving forward. 75 recommendations came out of that K-12 commission. And a couple of the main focuses that we heard from Manitobans was to strengthen literacy, numeracy, and of course, Indigenous education. And which then, you know, sort of takes me to a couple comments about our great initiatives that we've brought forward in response to the K-12 75 recommendation, K-12 Commission's 75 recommendations, Mr. Chair. You know, so April 20th, we launched the action plan, which I'm assuming by now the member opposite has had a chance to take a good look at it and basically talk about the four main pillars in our action plan. You know, making sure that within those pillars, you know, and I'll just take a few seconds, Mr. Chair, to mention them. I mean, so high quality learning is one of the pillars within the action plan. Of course, we need that. We need student engagement and well-being. I mean, we speak about that quite often. You know, and then of course, when it comes to teaching, we want to see excellence in teaching and leadership. So opportunities, you know, making sure that for the teachers, we've got those opportunities to continue on building on those successes for excellence and leadership. And then of course, responsive systems. Mr. Chair, this is such a great question that I might have to ask for leave to keep going. But in addition to the action plan, I mean, the very next day, on April 21st, we had a discussion. We launched our framework for learning, which again we had received great accolades about the action plan and the framework for learning. And then a week later, Mr. Chair, we launched Mamatuisuin, which is actually the thread that gets woven in to all of those four pillars that I mentioned from the action plan. So when we talk about listening to Manitobans, partnering with Manitobans, collaborating, making sure that our focus is on literacy, numeracy, and Indigenous inclusion and education, Mr. Chair. So I look forward to the member's next question or an opportunity to share more with everyone.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And there is an action plan there, and that part has been noted. What teachers are waiting for, respectfully, Minister, is how is this going to translate down to their everyday work in their classroom? And specifically, what opportunities will there be for teachers to enhance their professional development? And can he describe the resources that the department will allocate to ensure that this action plan really does impact that child in the classroom?
The Honorable Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, wow. So in regards to professional development, supporting teachers, making sure that we're moving forward, and the biggest thing, Mr. Chair, is exactly what is the center focus of absolutely everything: student success. Student success is the center of our action plan, everything that the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning is focused on, Mr. Chair. It's making sure that those students are ready so that when they graduate grade 12, they are ready to go on to some form of post-secondary, whether that's a private vocational institution, a college, a university, apprenticeship, or do you know what? I know this is going to sound crazy, or maybe just go and get a job, Mr. Chair. We want to make sure that those students are supported. And how do we make sure those students are supported? We have to make sure that, as I mentioned earlier, in the action plan, basically the excellence in teaching and leadership is very paramount, because we have to make sure that the teachers that are teaching our students are trained and they've got those professional development opportunities. Some of the core global competencies, Mr. Chair, I know that the member from Transcona has probably heard of this because he was probably tied in a little bit with some of his leadership professional development as well. But of course, a pan-Canadian global competencies was adopted by CMEC, the council, Canadian Council for Ministers of Education. So the 6 critical global competencies is citizenship, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, connection to self, and creativity, Mr. Chair. Within this, I know that we've got multiple different avenues to access different funds, whether that's through school divisions or we've got the transformation fund. The member mentioned earlier about the sustainable development division of the department from before that is now renamed, but we still have the education for sustainable development grant, which definitely can go on to help with teacher professional development. We've got for curriculum redevelopment. I mean, we're making sure that curriculum's up to date. I know under the previous government, back when I was still teaching, and then when I came into politics in 2011, I know that the previous government never ever really took a good look at keeping curriculum up to date, and they really didn't have a schedule. So what we're doing is we're making sure that curriculum is reviewed on a timely basis and making sure that we're, again, building on those successes. But at the same time, what is maybe changed in the world that needs to be tweaked within the curriculum? I think what teachers are looking for, what I've heard from my teacher friends from across this great province of ours is they're also looking so that curriculum is a little more not necessarily flexible, but more along the lines of consistency, making sure that whether they're teaching grade 1, let's just say math, and and then all of a sudden in a year or two they go on and they want to teach grade 6 math, that the curriculum is consistent. It looks the same, it feels the same, it's comfortable, so that they're not necessarily going in totally unprepared. Mr. Chair, I have a few more examples which I'll share in my next answer, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I knew about the ESD grant still being available, and that's a good thing, because I do know that schools really rely on that sustainable development grant, because it keeps the theme rolling. Well, development, and many teachers see that as a resource that helps them, teach and to learn about how to alleviate poverty. Talks about human rights, health and environmental protection, all important themes, especially coming out of the pandemic. We certainly noticed a lot of cracks that appeared in our system that need to be addressed. And one of the things that is interesting is that I know the minister talked about an up-to-date curriculum and the need for a schedule. Is the department providing or can the department provide a sort of roadmap for what pieces of their curriculum they're going to update, and so that teachers can know what's coming down the pipe and Manitobans can know what's coming down? I was kind of curious that he brought that up, Mr. Chair, and like to explore that a little further.
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will get to a portion of the member's question in a few seconds, but I just also wanted to mention about some of the other great things that the department and we are doing as a government to further strengthen teachers' professional development and making sure that teachers are supported, working with their curriculums, making sure that they're resourced up, and then if there's also professional development opportunities, again, working with school divisions, working with our Manitoba Teacher Society, definitely asking them, what are certain things that they're looking for professional development. And I mentioned the launch of Mamatuwisawin, which is an Indigenous education policy framework. I think that was around April 26th or 27th in there. Matter of fact, I think it was April 27th. So I wanted to touch on a little bit more that we're doing in that stream, because as I said before, Mamatuwisawin is the thread that winds in and throughout those four pillars. It's basically the foundation that we're going to be working towards, those pillars. And I appreciate the member saying the great resources that are available for teachers that are online, because that's sustainable development too. I mean, that's woven within within the curriculum, and we need to make sure that we're teaching those global competencies as well. So we just hired an Indigenous inclusion consultant who's going to be providing support to school divisions on the implementation of Mamituwisawin. Manitoba Rural Learning Consortium will be providing training for teachers beginning in rural school divisions, and will expand to urban and northern school divisions as well, Mr. Chair. I know also that when we start talking about that professional development, taking a look at the recommendations from the K-12 Commission. I mean, there were 75 recommendations, and I know, as I mentioned earlier, that the member no doubt has had an opportunity to go over the action plan with a fine-tooth comb, and making sure that he's brought up to speed on anything that's in that action plan. And of course, the framework for learning, and then Mamituwisawin as well. But to go to some additional answers to his later question in his question in regards to curriculum. I mean, this actually gives me an opportunity to say something else, but I'm going to reserve my comments on a couple things. But I'll just say that some of the recommendations that came out from the commission, and we know that, again, listening to thousands and thousands and thousands of Manitobans, we take a look at the recommendations is that curriculum gets reviewed. And one of the recommendations from the commission is definitely for the phys ed and the health curriculum to be reviewed, as well as the science curriculum. We know that teachers don't like to be surprised, and I think that myself teaching prior to 2011, I think there were too many surprises coming out of the NDP Department of Education, and it left many of us scratching our heads on a day-to-day basis. But you know what? It's a calling, Mr. Chair, and we continued moving on and teaching students to the best of our abilities. So absolutely, when the department starts to pull together the curriculum development process and the cyclical refinement, we're going to make sure that teachers and all education partners across this great province of ours are aware of what the cycle is going to be, so that there is no surprises, so that they know what's coming, because that's what we're about. We're about collaboration and having those good conversations, and seeing what's going to be working with those frontline workers, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Transcona.
So then I take it from the minister that there will be some sort of schedule coming forward so that teachers can see what's coming down the pipe. I think that's what I got out of that response. I'm not quite sure. So I look forward to seeing that. I'm sure many educators in the province would look forward to seeing that as well. I know the minister talks about Mamituwisawin and how that is going to impact teaching in the province and a child's experience at school. So what I'd like to ask the minister at this point regarding Mamituwisawin is, what are we going to see different if we take a snapshot of a classroom now? How is the classroom going to look? Say we'll take a middle year's classroom. Look a year from now, after Mamituwisawin has been rolling for about a year and resources have been allocated. What would the minister see as being different in those classrooms?
The Honorable, the Honorable Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And it's interesting that the member from Transcona would ask me a question like this. Now, part of it, oh, wait, before I get to his answer of this question, I know that in his preamble, he was asking me in regards to the curriculum development process, and I'm not quite sure what he was listening to, but I absolutely did say, yes, there is going to be a cyclical refinement of curriculum, and yes, there is going to be a sort of a timeline so that teachers and staff and administration will know when those timelines are and when that is all happening, Mr. Chair. So absolutely, unlike the previous government that kept surprising teachers every 6 months, it seemed, with different little tweaks and whatever that really didn't make sense, we're going to make sure that the curriculum is consistent. It looks and feels the same throughout the K-12 system. We're going to make sure that, again, going to and building upon and listening to the thousands and thousands and thousands of Manitobans that chimed in for the K-12 Commission. And one of the recommendations is to do, to take a look at the various curriculums and to start with phys ed and health and, of course, science, to make sure that schedule is out to the people that need to know what the schedule is, and those are our teachers and administrators, and making sure that they're following the various framework and the curriculum documents that they have to be teaching to their students, and making sure that and this is where I'll get into the minister or the member's question, making sure that Mama Tuwisuin is embedded within that learning as well. We know that there's, the member asks, well, what is a middle years classroom going to look like? Well, I can tell you that I taught middle years for a few years, and my classroom looked a little different than my colleague across the hall. It looked a little different from my colleague in a different school within the school division. I have no doubt that my classroom looked a little different from a colleague who is teaching, say, in Thompson in northern Manitoba. This is what's the great thing with us listening and collaborating with Manitobans, Mr. Chair. The fact is that we've developed the action plan, which is a living, breathing document, which, again, there's always going to be that reassessment going on and making sure that various partners are having the opportunity to chime in and to take a look at. Then, of course, Mama Tuwisuin is a framework as well that is built upon the fact of the Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, and is basically the action towards truth and reconciliation. Because I've said this multiple times, and this isn't a Wayne Wasco quotable. This is something that many people have said. You can't have reconciliation without truth. And so with that, Mr. Chair, and I know that I'm probably going to get called on the fact that I've said my own name, and I apologize for that if that's not allowed in committee, Mr. Chair. But some of the policies that we are going to be looking at, and I know that school divisions have already embraced, and it's not even a have to yet, because we're working on making sure that we've got those tools in place. We've got the supports in place from the department, working with teachers. Some of the policies that the 4 policy topics that we're talking about from Mama Tuwisuin is authentic involvement, putting students at the center, understanding of worldviews, values, identities, traditions, and contemporary lifestyles, and inclusive and culturally safe learning environments. Important stuff, Mr. Chair. Now, for me as a Minister of Education, to go to any, and I'm going to use his example as a middle school classroom, to go across the province and tell them thou shalt, shall look like blah, 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 that's not on. That's not cool. That's not what he would want me to do. And he'd be in the free press tomorrow or the local media telling that I should keep my nose out of school divisions plans. But Mr. Chair, I'm just making sure that the autonomy is there for school divisions, for teachers, and for administration to strengthen.
The minister's time is up. And I would remind the minister that, and I know you did recognize and explain and apologize, but I would remind him or remind the minister that even if you're referring to yourself, you must refer to yourself as the minister or the member for Lac du Bonnet. The honorable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's interesting that the minister would describe it like that, as far as thou shalt, what every classroom should look like. The intent of my earlier question, Mr. Chair, was just to get an indication of, what are some of the things that you would notice in a classroom as you're going through. Of course, there are going to be differences, right? But after putting I would probably imagine as a significant amount of resources into this initiative that you would notice some of that in a classroom. And that is what I was driving at. I'm never talking about being very prescriptive as far as it comes to classrooms. No, but there are going to be certain signposts that you're going to notice as far as differences, because we do know that classrooms evolve, absolutely. So that I want to put that on the record too, Mr. Chair, because I think these are important initiatives, absolutely, and there needs to be you have to notice what the investments have resulted in, and that was the root of my question. I'd like to move on to the Auditor General's report and what he was talking about as far as the department being ready for the COVID-19 pandemic. The Auditor General, Mr. Chair, did note a lack of preparation due to not having an emergency management program or proactive coordination with K-12 leaders in the province. There are a list of 8 recommendations, including regular assessments of risks, hazards, vulnerabilities of the school system, and the creation of plans to improve internet connectivity so online learning is accessible everywhere in the province, and to avoid a repeat situation of what occurred during the pandemic. The Auditor General, Mr. Chair, also indicated there was neither an emergency management program nor a coordinated emergency plan for schools. Said that the documents that were there were outdated and did not consider the consequences of remote learning, which, it's a good thing to have some of these pieces put forward by the Auditor General so that we know that we can move forward and make the necessary adjustments. The Auditor General also found that there was no province-wide data collection happening to identify long-term risks and impacts of the pandemic, and little work had been done when it came to recovery planning throughout the review period, which occurred between January of 2020 and February of 2021. So, Mr. Chair, my question to the Minister is, since the report has been released, what plans has the department undertaken to ensure preparedness for the next public health event that may occur in the not too distant future?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to need a GPS system to figure out which way the member keeps going with his questions, because he sort of goes a little bit on one set of questions and then wants some more information, but then jumps to another topic. So I'm going to go back a little bit with the Mamatuisuin, and I'm not sure what he meant about the thou shalts. I'm not sure if he's saying that I should be telling them thou shall do certain things or not. I'm hoping not, but nonetheless, I know that the member, my friend from Transcona, has no doubt done his homework and looked at the various different documents that our department has put out. In collaboration, again, with Manitobans, and taking into account the recommendations put forward by the K-12 Commission, which I must say has not happened since 1959. So I'm glad to be part of a government that actually did something like that, and again is building on the successes that are within our education system. And again, the member knows that there's various things within the education system, even in his own career as an educator and administrator at the early years level, that there were things that were great, and there were things that were pretty good but needed some tweaking, and there are things not so good. So, on the Mamatuisuin, so when he talks about, what types of things are people going to be able to see within the classrooms? Well, I'll encourage the member, and I'm going to give him a little bit of a hint here, to pick up the document and take a quick look, because it specifically, Mr. Chair, outlines various things that, with the framework, and again, weaving in Mamatuisuin into those 4 pillars that I spoke about earlier in regards to the action plan, there is pretty much a great roadmap here, Mr. Chair, in regards to the various roles and responsibilities of everybody involved. There's a role for students in regards to the policies. Use values, identities, traditions, etc., and inclusive and culturally safe learning environment. So there's a role for students. And what is that going to look like under all those policies? It's laid out quite nicely. Teachers, of course, teachers are paramount in the delivery of not only the action plan, but the framework and Mamatuisuin. So there's a role for teachers, and it tells, again, going under those 4 policies, school-based support teams, school leaders, school division, district leaders, Manitoba Education Early Childhood. There's a role for us in the department too, Mr. Chair. And it's all going to be happening and continuing to happen as it already has. It's just that it is going to be a little more focused, and there's a bit of a roadmap, and making sure that those resources are there. Mr. Chair, also, I would be remiss to mention, of course, another great support that we're doing for schools is in regards to our Elders and Knowledge Keepers announcement that we made for schools initiative. And again, much like what I said earlier in regards to not every school is going to be using these tools, these resources the same, but just knowing that they're there is very important. And it's unfortunate, Mr. Chair, that the previous government never really thought of doing some of this stuff, but we're doing it, and that's okay, because it's more about from today moving forward. And again, we launched these messages. So the Elders and Knowledge Keepers in Schools initiatives are going to support students, educators, and families to learn First Nations, Métis, and Inuit histories, languages, cultures, tradition, values, etc. And of course, the traditional knowledge systems all across their K-12 learning environments. And again, I encourage the member to pick up the document Mamatuisuin and take a read. It's not a difficult read. It's very nicely laid out. There's multiple colors, to keep attentive. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll answer his question on the OAG in my next answer, Mr. Chair.
I would like to remind the minister and also members of this committee just regarding the appropriateness of addressing members. Should not refer to people as my friend only, but rather refer to members by the ministry or their constituency, or if you're going to use my friend, then it should be my friend, the member from a particular constituency. So just for clarification, the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that guidance, and my apologies for, I don't think that was an offensive comment, but it's again, it's a more of a rookie mistake, Mr. Chair. So moving forward, if I do mention my friend, I will definitely mention my friend's constituency as well from Transcona. So just so that I've got many friends I know that's in the committee room and that's probably listening to this riveting debate this afternoon. And so if I'm talking about any specific friend, I'll make sure that I mention where they're from. Thanks, Mr. Chair, for your guidance.
We thank the minister for that explanation. And I would call on the honourable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do look forward to the minister's response regarding the AG report and as far as plans. These are important issues that were brought up, and I'm anticipating the minister's response to that portion of my questioning earlier.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, my friend from Dauphin, for allowing me to put a few words on the record in regards to the member for Transcona, and just so that he doesn't feel left out. My friend, the member from Transcona, on the OAG's report, Mr. Chair. So, unfortunately, the member from Transcona felt that it wasn't important to give the whole story. But this is nothing new, and again, I'm strongly encouraged by the relationship that I have with the member from Transcona, that it's not necessarily intentional. But I do know that in the past, some of the members from the NDP, the opposition, sometimes tends to not put the whole story on the record, and then leaves some room for interpretation. So I am going to put a few the whole story sort of on the record. So the OAG report, which was released in early April. I mean, we take a look at the time period. First of all, the time period of the OAG's report. First of all, you know what? Before the member for Transcona takes something that I'm saying out of context, I do want to thank the Office of the Auditor General for their work and their acknowledgement of the efforts made by the department and the broader education system, keeping in mind that this was a worldwide pandemic, and the time frame when the Auditor General did their investigation, really the audit, was done from January 1st, 2020 to February 28th, 2021. And many of the things that were pointed out in that audit, many things already had improved. And keep in mind that roles and responsibilities, decisions and actions, of other departments, of course, including the Office of the Chief Provincial Public Health Officer, individual schools or school divisions. I mean, everybody played a role, Mr. Chair. And again, there was no playbook necessarily. I know that the Office of the Auditor General, basically made a comment. Finding that the department said was not prepared for the pandemic, but, and this is where the member from Transcona fails to put on the record, but, and I quote, led an effective system response and did not initiate recovery efforts during the first year of the pandemic. Led an effective system response. So after things actually got rolling, and listening to advice of the Chief Public Health Officer, the Department of Education, and back at the time, I'll just sort of give a bit of a shout out also to my new department family members from early childhood learning. Again, we're adapting and changing and had to be flexible and nimble in regards to how we were reacting to the pandemic. And I applaud, because of course at that time when the audit was done, I was not the education minister, but I applaud the hard work of the education minister at the time, as well as the department staff and officials and all our education partners all across the province. So to the member, through you, Mr. Chair, to the member from Transcona, I thank the work of the Office of the Auditor General. We have 3 working tables to address all 8 of the recommendations. If he wants, I could go through a bit of a list as far as who's on those working tables. But basically, Mr. Chair, I believe that the department worked very, very well in regards to the pandemic. Is there things that we would do differently if we could back up to the start of January 1st when the audit began? Absolutely. But Mr. Chair, we've made very huge efforts moving forward.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I was looking for, Mr. Chair, is the guidance that the department has taken from the AEG report. I did hear the minister say that there are 3 working tables to address the recommendations that have been established. I'm hoping that as these tables are established, that some guidance is taken from the AG report. There's a lot of good things in there that certainly the department can take some guidance from, and I see it as an important step because preparation is important when it comes to critical departments like the Department of Ed, and ensuring that they're ready to go when these events do befall the system. I do know too that what came out of that, Mr. Chair, was a real focus on how important air quality is in schools, and air ventilation systems are in schools, Mr. Chair. It's become noted, there's a significant body of research now, Mr. Chair, that says air ventilation and air quality is something that can be not only improved, but also focused on, because it keeps buildings and the people within the buildings safe, prevents the spread of airborne viruses like COVID or like the common cold or like the flu. And these are important pieces that need to be addressed. My question to the minister at this point is, does the department meet with directors of maintenance or secretary treasurers to get an idea of an audit of the quality of air system and air ventilation in our public schools?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I'd like to thank the member for the question, and it gives me an opportunity to talk again about, the various different things that the audit had shown. And again, I wanted to stress that we appreciate the work of the Office of the Auditor General, and taking a look at the response, and also for their office acknowledging the fact that that it was an effective response overall, and that once, like we said, during that year of the first year of the pandemic and being audited, also acknowledging and knowing that we had already put many things in place since that audit had been completed, and then again of the recommendations put forward by the Auditor General, making sure that we're working. All of the recommendations are in progress, and over the past year, the Manitoba government has made appreciable investments into the education system to ensure that school divisions can provide in-person learning, and this includes investments that we've made. Personal protective equipment. The member mentions ventilation projects, which is great. I'm sort of glad that somehow telepathically I messaged him and asked him to bring up ventilation, because I think, we still have a lot of work to do, Mr. Chair, but I think the mess that we inherited in 2016 and I think the collaborative approach that our team within the PC government took to highlight some of the weaknesses within the infrastructure, I guess, within our school divisions and our schools had absolutely been lacking, because we know that the former government never met a ribbon that they didn't like to cut, Mr. Chair, and some of the deferred maintenance and various things along those lines. We know that we've got 20 plus years of catch up to do on deferred maintenance, and this doesn't only go in the education system, but absolutely all across this great province of ours, Mr. Chair. But in regards to capital, and I know that the members asked the question about whether the department speaks to secretary treasurers or maintenance supervisors or whatever, I think is a great question, because it gives me that opportunity to say, yes, absolutely. There is multiple conversations happening between the department and those officials within school divisions, Mr. Chair. We talk about the safe school funding alone that we provided to school divisions throughout the pandemic. For the 21-22 school year, we had $63 million were allocated through the Safe Schools Fund. That basically breaks down to, $45 million, helping with mental health and well-being, safety, addressing learning impacts, and vaccine promotion. We had $6.8 million in ventilation improvements. Divisions were asked to, take an assessment of what is your ventilation systems? How are they working? What's going on? Because we know that the previous government, the previous NDP government, really didn't feel that deferred maintenance was important. And so we felt it was important. And of course, coming into COVID, air quality, hey, pretty important, Mr. Chair. So we made sure that we were asking school divisions to go and take a bit of an inventory on their ventilation needs. And we provided, we made sure that there was a couple avenues for them to, school divisions to approach the department, and also department under the MLA for Brandon West to make sure that their capital improvements are met. Mr. Chair, I know that the member from Transcona fails to commend our government for increased funding to education, but it's a fact, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's interesting that the Minister, Mr. Chair, brings up the maintenance dollars that are needed to ensure schools are safe learning environments. Those are important. That's important information to know, and certainly something that school divisions are have had to deal with for a number of years, especially since 2016, Mr. Chair. The maintenance deficits in many school divisions throughout this province are noted. It's something that they regularly bring up with the department, and are looking forward to a plan to address many of those maintenance deficits that do exist. It's important. I'm glad that the minister brought that up, because it's going to take significant planning and investment to ensure that right now, what's noted by the experts, Mr. Chair, is the need for improved ventilation in schools. I will also say, Mr. Chair, that $16 million to improve ventilation is a start, one would suppose, and I would like to see more dedicated to this, because this is an important piece, because it's not just about COVID or any pandemic. This is just about creating great learning and working environments for kids. And I would anticipate that the minister and his department allocate the necessary resources to tackle this deficit, because it's an important one that needs to be looked at, and one that that does require a lot of attention. What also requires a lot of attention, Mr. Chair, is the state of equity in education in this province. Many in Manitoba have called the introduction of education equity offices in Winnipeg and in other cities and parts of our provinces absolutely essential in order to address systemic racism and improve representation and outcomes for all kids and be accountable to the public. It's important that kids see role models that they can look up to, especially in their classrooms. Seeing themselves reflected in their teachers and other adults that work in the building is important. It produces hope in kids. It produces something that is really important. And I do know that Equity Matters, there's a group that exists that has spent a lot of time and resources in meeting with politicians in Manitoba. And so, Mr. Chair, my question to the minister is, has he been in contact with Equity Matters in Manitoba, and what plans have come out of those meetings, and if you can describe those plans?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, good thing that I'm able to take a look in the crystal ball and see where the member from Transcona, my friend, the member from Transcona, is going with his questions, because we went from OAG report to ventilation and then to equity matters, and it's a fun afternoon, Mr. Chair. And but that being said, I would like to go back for a couple seconds before I answer his question on equity matters, Mr. Chair. So just to be clear, I just want to make sure that the member knows, and I appreciate the member saying and applauding us for the great work that we have been doing on ventilation. I know that we had a huge mess to clean up, but we're doing it. And I appreciate the member for acknowledging that we are moving forward. We have a lot of work yet to do, Mr. Chair. And I know that if the member has specific questions in regards to, the percentages of schools that have air conditioning or don't have air conditioning or improved ventilation systems, I know that the member would probably be interested in joining the Minister of Labor, Consumer Protection, and Government Services on that question. But I would like to share with the member, because I've said it multiple times in question period, but I'm not sure if the member is really taking it to heart, that our $327 million investments in education over the last 2 years, which is over a 17.2% increase. That doesn't include, Mr. Chair, the capital funding that we've dedicated to schools. But the member doesn't want to talk about that because it's a good news story. It's a great news story. It's, for the last few years, we were dedicating $160 million to capital improvements and renovations and all that. We've actually upped that by $100 million, Mr. Chair. So we've dedicated $260 million over the last few years to capital improvements and basically to address some of the deferred maintenance that the previous NDP government just didn't really pay attention to, Mr. Chair. And within that, Mr. Chair, good news story, we've made a commitment of building 20 new schools by 2026-27. And you know what, Mr. Chair? We needed to up that as well. So we're actually going to be building 22 new schools, which is great for again, planning ahead for the future, which I know that the previous government, all they wanted to do was build some portables, and they kept building portables. Don't get me wrong, we still need some portables, which is great, but at the same time, it's building these new schools, Mr. Chair, and having that foresight to making sure that we're getting ready for the future, because we're going to have so many new Manitobans coming to Manitoba, and they're going to be bringing their kids, and we're just going to have to teach them and have room for them. And it's just fantastic information, Mr. Chair. To equity matters, absolutely equity matters, Mr. Chair. And I think that when students are sitting in the classrooms and they're taking a look at their teachers who are instructing them in front of the classroom or within the classroom, within the building, they want to see themselves there as well. So that's why we're working hard with our various partners all across this great province of ours, our education partners. But again, I know that I'm going to say something here that I know that the member knows, but for those listening at home and tuned into this conversation about estimates of education and early childhood learning, the member knows that school divisions and school boards actually hire the teachers, and I know they're working hard to make sure that they're hiring equitable and many different people with different cultural backgrounds to educate our students all across this great province of ours, Mr. Chair. We've had meetings with Equity Matters, but I'm not going to go into specific dates. Tom Sims, Crystal Libera, Sumi Matthews, to name a few. And we are working on various different things moving forward. They're absolutely thrilled with the recommendations from the K-12 Commission, and they're thrilled with the action plan, Mr. Chair. So I look forward to the members' next question.
The honourable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did hear the minister say something about an action plan regarding equity. Can he expand on what he was referring to? And it was just in the last few seconds there.
The honourable minister. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'm not quite sure why my friend, the member from Transcona, has that scowly look on his face. But I was absolutely, I thought, pretty clear that within the action plan, it's definitely within the action plan to make sure that that equity is brought forward within our school system. Again, it's a living, breathing document. I strongly encourage the member to take a read. If he doesn't have a copy, if he wants, and this is not one of those things where we need, the clerk's office to write down and get him a copy. If he really needs a copy, I can get him a copy. I can give him a copy tomorrow or later today. I can highlight some of the pages as far as where some of his questions, really the answers are there. But Equity Matters is a key stakeholder of ours, partner on having conversations about making sure that, as we move forward, educating our students, that they're thrilled. And maybe the member himself has met with Equity Matters, Mr. Chair. And I'm sure that they would say that they're happy with the action plan. It's one of our guiding principles within the action plan. I'm not going to do a Where's Waldo thing this with him, but I strongly encourage him to read the action plan. It's in there. So he didn't need to have that look on his face in regards to what I meant by equity and the fact that it's in the action plan, because I think even if we look back in Hansard, I was pretty clear. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to continue the conversation that we were able to have last week in regards to childcare. I want to thank my colleague for giving an opportunity to ask some questions, and I'd like to thank the minister for being here today to answer some of them. I'd like to just go back to the question of subsidy, which is what we ended on last week. Today, of course, we did raise that in question period, and I'm not sure that we received much clarity from the minister last week when we discussed this government's approach to the subsidy. So I'm just hoping he can provide some clarity over the rollout and what's been happening with that. One specific question I'd like to ask, and I'm seeking clarity on, is we're hearing from childcare centers that anyone who applies for the subsidy, regardless of whether or not they fall outside of above the $83,000 income threshold, everybody's getting it. So I'm hearing stories of families that are, $250,000 a year income families that are applying and have been getting months of free childcare, which raises serious questions about equity and how these dollars are being distributed. Again, this is what we're hearing from centers. Can the minister provide clarity as to why that's happening, and a little bit more clarity about what his government is doing to respond to the confusion out there about this subsidy rollout?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate my friend from St. James asking me a few questions. He started the questioning about. He thanked me for being here for these questions and answers on estimates, and I'm not quite sure where else I would be. But that being said, I thank him for being here as well to be able to ask some questions, and it's going to give me an opportunity to be able to put some information on the record that hopefully will bring clarity. So I'm not gonna go down the vein of pointing out to the member from St. James, whether he's putting false narratives on the record or whatever else. I'm not going to go there right now. I'm just going to basically, he's looking for some clarity. Some people that he's talking to are asking for some clarity. He's saying specific centers are asking for some clarity around the subsidy rollout, as I've answered him in question period. One of the key points to this rollout, and again, trying to make sure that, number one, that we're increasing seats, but we're also making sure that the childcare seats are affordable. And so by rolling out the $75 million to improve the affordability of childcare through the advanced subsidy payments to facilities was very important. I'm not sure, as far as clarity to the sector. So we had two great announcements in February. I know the member no doubt read the news releases and was there for listening to what I had to say, but also the Premier and Minister Gould and even the Prime Minister was on one of them, as I said today in question period as well. We're talking about a major subsidy indexing increase here, and the goal of the subsidy rollout is to make sure that as quickly as we possibly could, make sure that those dollars are rolled out to those families that need ahead of time during the application process. As far as confusion goes, I'm not quite sure what the member's 100% speaking about, and I'm hoping then that the member from St. James can then pass along to me any childcare centers or directors or board members that he's aware of, so that we can help with some clarity. Because the announcements happened in February. Since February, we've put out communications, we've put out circulars. Matter of fact, the member from St. James mentioned the last time that we got together for estimates, he mentioned about the circulars, which he knows that there's information flowing. We had a couple virtual workshops, townhouses workshops where people could ask questions. One was on March 30th. We just had another one on May 20th. Over 400 participants, Mr. Chair. So I think as far as clarity and any type of that, and don't get me wrong, there's always going to be times when individuals have further questions. And so again, we wanted to make sure that the $75 million, in the time period of being able to be able to do the application process, Mr. Chair, some of the eligibility that's taken into account into the process. And this is from the department. So the childcare centers, what they need to do is they need to continue to do what they've always been doing, and that's providing the department with their enrollment and who's sitting in the chairs. But the department, some of the things that are for eligibility is household income, the family makeup, number of children, and ages of the children. And then that's where the subsidies sort of come into play, Mr. Chair. So as far as I know that we'll probably have another couple questions coming from the member on this topic, so I look forward to those and providing more clarity as time goes on here, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In relation to confusion about the subsidy, I'm going to read the minister an email that was sent from a local childcare director to ELCC and the response that they received. This is to ELCC. Hello, I'm looking for more information on the whole subsidy advance situation. I did not encourage our families enrolled as of February 6, 2022 to apply. It seemed unlikely that they would receive quote unquote free childcare, and I did not want to infer they would. Very few of our families took this up and applied, so now it seems our other families were at a disadvantage since they did not apply. It now appears to me that the program is extended to July 23rd, 2022. So can I now encourage all those older families and any new ones to apply and receive the 3 months credit? This has been a very unclear process and certainly not the way I would expect our government to do business. Clarity is much appreciated. Here's the response from ELCC, from your government. Hello, thank you for your email. I understand the frustration. Yes, ELCC is advising all licensed childcare facilities to strongly encourage all families, not those that should qualify, all families to apply for subsidy. Facilities should use the subsidy advancement to credit all families enrolled in the childcare facility, subsidized families and non-subsidized families, starting February 6, 2022. If facilities have not done so and still have a surplus of the subsidy advancement allocations, the facility may credit all families 3 months free childcare using the subsidy advancement to cover childcare costs starting immediately. If the facility does not have a surplus, then only credit those families who have approved subsidy. I wanted to read that from the minister just so that he could hear it right from what was shared by government to a childcare director in our community, to give him a sense of what's driving confusion, frustration, and frankly, what's driving a huge missed opportunity for a lot of low-income families who are not learning about the subsidy, who are being left behind. Meanwhile, as this states, we have other families that are far beyond the income limits that are applying and are getting free childcare. This isn't partisan politics, Minister. This is just information I'm sharing, and it's genuinely concerning because there's families that are missing out on potentially thousands of dollars of income supports at a time when they're really struggling. And I am happy to share this email with you. I've mentioned this to you, and I will send this to you so you can see it. I do want to insert one last question because I think we're going to run out of time here. Very quickly, around supply. We need more childcare spaces for Manitoban families in this province. We're in desperate need of that. The minister knows there's a huge line, a huge number of families that are in the queue for spaces. The Manitoba Childcare Agreement that was recently signed states that this province will seek to add 23,000 childcare spaces by 25-26. That will ultimately create coverage for a total of only 40.1% of preschool children in Manitoba, assuming that we have 121,000 children, 0 to 6, that would qualify. And those are numbers that are all from the agreement. Every other province, or almost every other province, has committed to meeting 59% or covering 59% of children in those age categories. Why is Manitoba getting the same federal supports, getting 20% less spaces than other provinces?
I would ask the member for St. James, is that letter that you read, is it private correspondence?
It's an email that I was given permission to share. So I am happy to share.
The honourable member for St. James.
It is private correspondence, but I was given permission to share this.
Okay, if you could, we would need 4 copies tabled. And if you only have one, we can take it and photocopy it for the members of this committee. The Honourable Minister, are you ready to answer yet? No? The Honourable Minister?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I think, definitely I look forward to taking a look at the email, take a look at the response, of course, see the timing of that and whatever. I mean, definitely, we're trying to make sure that those who absolutely need are getting, and that they're applying and they're going to be getting the money. This is the most generous subsidy program ever in the history of the province, Mr. Chair, in regards to childcare spaces. I'm assuming we're going to be going back into estimates shortly as well, so I can continue on some of the members' additional questions the next time. But definitely I want to point out that the subsidy indexing increase, Mr. Chair, basically if we take a look at various amounts, the 45% that we have done here in Manitoba is the largest. The last indexing fee increase by the previous NDP government in July of 2012 was 5.
Order. Hour being 5 p.m. Committee rise.